The graveyard. A final goodbye. The graveyard was eerily quiet as Lucas stood in front of the weathered tombstone, his heart heavy with grief. The sun was setting, casting a dim orange glow across the rows of graves, and the wind whispered softly through the trees. The air felt thick, as if the earth itself was mourning the loss of the woman he once loved. He could hardly believe that Elena, the woman who had been his everything, was really gone. It felt like just yesterday they had shared their dreams, their laughter, their hopes for a future together. But now, all that remained was the cold, hard reality that she was no longer alive. His hand trembled as he touched the stone, his eyes brimming with tears. "I never thought I'd be here," Lucas whispered, his voice breaking. "I promised you. I promised I would always protect you, keep you safe. But I failed you." His words echoed in the silence, as if the grave itself was listening to him. For weeks he had tried to find peace, to accept the fact that Elena was gone. But nothing could fill the emptiness in his chest. The grief was suffocating, and every day felt like a struggle to breathe. He had lost not only the woman he loved, but also his purpose, his reason for moving forward. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, Lucas took a deep breath. He could still remember her face, her laughter, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke about their future. His mind replayed those moments over and over. But now they were just memories, painful reminders of a life he could never return to. With one last glance at her grave, Lucas spoke softly, almost as if he were talking to himself. "Goodbye, Elena. I hope you found peace, wherever you are." His voice cracked and he bowed his head, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. He turned to leave, his footsteps slow and heavy, but as he walked away he felt something. A cold breeze brushed against his neck, and for a split second it felt like someone was standing behind him. He stopped. His heart raced in his chest as his instincts screamed at him to turn around, but he was too afraid to look. He told himself it was just the wind, but something felt different. Something felt off. Suddenly, a soft touch on his shoulder made him freeze. A chill ran down his spine. He knew that touch. It was unmistakable. Elena's hand. He turned around quickly, his heart hammering in his chest. And there she was, standing before him, alive. The world seemed to stop for a moment. His breath caught in his throat and his eyes widened in disbelief. Elena, the woman he had buried just days ago, was standing right there, staring at him with wide, confused eyes. "Elena," Lucas whispered, his voice trembling. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Was this some kind of cruel joke? A hallucination? His hand reached out toward her, his fingers brushing against her arm, feeling the warmth of her skin. Elena blinked, looking just as confused. "Lucas, what's happening? Where am I?" For a moment everything felt unreal. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to find the words. The woman he had said goodbye to was standing right in front of him, alive and breathing. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all, but no answers came. The graveyard, the silence, the darkness. They all seemed to fade away as Lucas stared at her, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Had Elena truly come back? Or was this some twisted nightmare he couldn't escape? The confusion and the revelation. Lucas stood frozen, his hand still hovering over Elena's arm, unsure if he was dreaming or if reality itself had somehow cracked. Elena blinked several times, her eyes wide with confusion. She looked just as startled as he was, her breath shallow, her skin warm like nothing had ever happened. But there was something different about her, something he couldn't quite place. "Lucas?" Elena's voice trembled as she spoke his name, her brow furrowing in disbelief. What's going on? Why am I here?" The words felt strange, too strange. She should have been dead. He had buried her, spoken his final words over her grave. She was supposed to be gone forever, yet here she was, standing in front of him looking as alive as ever, though the cold dread that clutched his chest refused to let go. He blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of the scene. The grave, the tombstone, her unmistakable touch. It all felt wrong, as if the world around him had shifted into a place where the rules didn't apply anymore. "Elena, you can't be here, you're dead," Lucas whispered, almost as if saying it aloud would somehow make it true. His hands shook as he reached out to touch her cheek, just to confirm that she wasn't some kind of ghost or hallucination. But her skin was warm, soft, real. Elena recoiled slightly, her expression still puzzled. "What are you talking about?" I was on a mission. I remember the explosion. I remember the pain. And then, nothing." Her words hit Lucas like a slap. The explosion. He had never told her the full details, but the memory came flooding back. Elena's last mission had been a dangerous one, a mission she hadn't come back from. The blast had left no trace of her body, and they had declared her dead. The funeral, the burial, everything was supposed to be final. But now she was standing before him, alive, with no recollection of how or why. Lucas's mind raced. Something wasn't right. She was too calm, too unaware of the impossible situation she was in. Her eyes, though still familiar, seemed too distant, as if they were hiding something he couldn't yet understand. "Elena, listen to me," Lucas said, his voice low but urgent. "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be alive. Something is wrong." Elena's gaze flickered to the grave behind him. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. For a moment she simply stared at it, her expression softening. "I was buried," she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't remember being dead." Her hand moved instinctively to her chest, pressing against her heart. "I don't remember anything from after the mission." Suddenly the wind picked up, sending a shiver through both of them. The quiet graveyard felt even more desolate now. There was a strange stillness in the air, a sense that the universe itself was holding its breath. "Maybe we should leave," Lucas said, his voice tinged with unease. "There's too much we don't understand." But as he took a step away, Elena gripped his arm with surprising strength. He turned to look at her, his eyes searching hers for some kind of explanation. Her grip tightened, and in that moment he realized that she wasn't just confused, she was scared. "I feel different," she whispered, looking down at her hands, then back up at him, her eyes wide with something Lucas couldn't quite identify. "Like I'm not the same person. I can't explain it." A chill ran down his spine. It was then that he noticed something even stranger. Her eyes, though still the same familiar shade of brown, shimmered faintly like a reflection of starlight in the night sky. It wasn't just a trick of the light. Something was changing in her, something that was far beyond the natural. Before he could respond, a cold gust of wind swept through the graveyard, carrying with it an unsettling sound. A faint buzzing, like static in the air. Lucas's instincts screamed at him to get out of there. "Elena, we need to leave." "Now?" he said urgently, pulling her toward the gate. But Elena hesitated, her gaze locked onto the tombstone again, her face pale. Something was wrong. Lucas could feel it deep in his bones, and whatever it was, it had just begun. As they moved toward the gate, the ground seemed to hum beneath their feet, as if the earth itself was alive and watching them. Elena glanced over her shoulder, a deep frown crossing her face. "We can't run from this, Lucas," she said softly, almost as if she knew the truth long before he did. "Something's coming, something dangerous." Lucas's heart sank. This was no ordinary resurrection, and the truth about what had really happened to Elena was something neither of them was ready to face. But they had no choice but to move forward, no matter the cost. The truth behind Elena's resurrection. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and disbelief. Elena's return was impossible yet undeniable. Every attempt to explain her presence seemed to fall short of the truth. Lucas had tried to search for answers, But no matter where he turned, the puzzle pieces refused to fit. Every lead, every source, every piece of information only deepened the mystery. Elena, though physically intact, had become something else. Her memories were fragmented, lost between the explosion that had taken her life and the eerie moment she reappeared in, the graveyard. She didn't remember the exact details of her mission, but fragments would surface in her dreams, strange flashes of images too vivid to ignore. And every time she awoke, the feelings of dread and alienation clung to her like a shadow. One evening, as they sat in the dimly lit kitchen of the apartment Lucas had been staying in since her death, the air between them grew thick with unspoken questions. Helena was staring at the surface of the table, her fingers tapping nervously, her mind clearly elsewhere. Lucas watched her carefully, the weight of the silence pressing down on him. "Elena," he began, his voice hesitant but firm. "We need to talk about what happened. You need to remember everything. We can't keep pretending this is normal." Elena's gaze flickered up to meet his, and for the first time Lucas noticed the faint shimmer in her eyes, like a reflection of some distant star, faint but undeniably present. It unsettled him. "I've tried, Lucas," she whispered, her voice cracking with frustration. "I want to remember. I swear." The enemy within. The facility hummed with a low mechanical rhythm, the artificial lights flickering overhead as Lucas and Elena made their way deeper into the complex. The walls were lined with sterile metal, everything gleaming and cold as, though the building itself was designed to strip away warmth, emotion, and individuality, it felt like the heart of a machine. A place where human lives were treated as expendable resources, where the line between man and monster was blurred beyond recognition. Lucas glanced over at Elena, who walked silently beside him, her face a mask of determination. But beneath that he could see the cracks, the unease, the fear. Her body was still hers, but the power growing within her was something far beyond anything either of them had anticipated. She was becoming something they couldn't control, and the thought of that terrified him. They had barely escaped the clutches of the shadowy group that had resurrected her, but escaping wasn't enough. They had to uncover the truth. What was happening to Elena, who was really behind all of this, and what the consequences would be if they didn't stop it. As they reached the heart of the facility, the door in front of them opened without a sound. Inside was a room that felt different from the others, warmer, almost as if it had been designed to feel human. A small control panel blinked on the far wall, and in the center of the room stood an array of screens, each displaying faces, maps, and encrypted data. It was clear they weren't alone. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice called out from the shadows. It was a woman's voice, cold and authoritative, but it sent a chill down Elena's spine. From the shadows stepped a figure, tall and composed, her face hidden behind a dark visor. She stepped into the light, and Lucas recognized her instantly. Agent Kara, a high-ranking officer in the government's covert operations unit. Elena had worked alongside her in the past, before her death. But now, seeing her standing there, Lucas felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. There was something off about her, something mechanical in the way she moved, the way she spoke. It was as if she weren't entirely human anymore. Elena froze, her voice barely a whisper. "Kara, what's going on?" Kara's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't one of warmth or familiarity. It was a smile of someone who knew a secret that the world wasn't ready to hear. "Oh, Elena, how sweet that you remember me," she said, her tone mocking. "But your memory is so fragmented, isn't it? You don't remember everything. Not the mission, not the true purpose of your resurrection, but I'm sure you'll find that out soon enough." Lucas stepped forward, his anger rising. "What did you do to her? What's happened to you?" Kara's eyes flickered for a moment, and her smile faded. For a split second, there was a glimmer of something in her gaze, something that was unmistakably human. But then it was gone, replaced by a chilling emptiness. "You really don't understand, do you?" she said. her voice cold as ice. You think this is about Elena. You think it's about a mission or even a war, but you're missing the bigger picture. Kara moved closer, her steps deliberate, each one carrying the weight of authority. We've been experimenting with more than just resurrection, Lucas. Elena isn't the only one. You've seen the chamber, haven't you? She nodded toward the empty space in the corner, the place where the other Elena had once stood, her body transformed into something unnatural. The truth began to sink in, and it hit Lucas like a hammer to the chest. You're making an army, he whispered, horror creeping into his voice. You're creating soldiers like Elena, alive, but not human, controlled, programmed, expendable. Kara's expression softened for a moment as if she were trying to convince herself of something. You still don't get it. This isn't about control, Lucas. It's about survival. The war we've been fighting isn't just against a foreign enemy, it's against time itself. The enemy out there. They have a way of making death meaningless. They've been doing it for centuries. And Earth? She trailed off, a hint of something almost like regret in her eyes. Earth doesn't stand a chance unless we fight fire with fire. Elena took a step forward, her voice trembling with emotion. You're saying, you're turning people into weapons. You're using death to create something not human. Kara nodded, almost apologetically. The war is coming, Elena. It's coming whether we're ready or not. And those like you, the ones we brought back, the ones who have been altered, they're the only ones who can stand against what's coming. You're not just a soldier. You're the key to humanity's survival. The words felt like a weight on Elena's chest. She had always believed that the fight was for something greater, something pure. But now it seemed as though her very existence had been twisted into a weapon, a tool in a game she never chose to play. Why didn't you tell me? Elena whispered, the hurt in her voice clear. Why didn't you give me a choice? Kara stepped back, her face hardening once again. Choice? You didn't have a choice. None of us did. The moment we became part of this project, we gave up our right to decide. But you've always been special, Elena. Always meant for more. Elena clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She was no longer sure who she was, whether she was a soldier, a weapon, or something in between. But one thing was clear. She wasn't going to let them control her. I'm not your puppet, she said, her voice steady but filled with fury. I'm not anyone's weapon. Lucas could see it now. The person standing before him wasn't just Elena anymore. It was something new, a force that would no longer be controlled. The walls that had kept her trapped were beginning to crumble, and with each passing moment, the person she was becoming grew stronger. I'm done playing. By your rules, Elena said, turning her back on Kara, her eyes burning with determination. If you want to control me, you'll have to fight me first. Kara's expression didn't change, but Lucas could see the faintest flicker of something. Fear, perhaps. Because in that moment, it was clear. They had created a monster. But it wasn't the kind they had intended, the final battle. The air inside the facility was thick with tension. Elena stood at the center of the command room, her body humming with energy, her senses stretched to their limit. Everything felt different now. The walls, the people, even the air itself. The control they had over her was slipping through their fingers, and she knew it. The power inside her, the power she couldn't fully understand, was waking up, and with it, the storm was about to break. Lucas stood a few steps away, his expression a mixture of awe and fear. He had watched Elena go from the woman he loved to something more. The human side of her was still there. He could see it in her eyes when she looked at him, when her voice softened in moments of doubt. But the rest of her? It was becoming something else, something untouchable, something that felt alien. Are you sure about this? Lucas asked quietly, his voice laced with concern. His eyes searched hers for some sign that she was still the woman he knew, that she was still the one who had fought for what was right. Elena's gaze met his, her expression unreadable. There's no turning back now, Lucas. Whatever happens. Next, we do this on our terms. The steel doors to the facility's main hall hissed open, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. A group of armed soldiers emerged, their faces set in grim determination. Kara stood at the front of the group, flanked by other high-ranking officials who had kept their distance up until now. Their eyes were cold, calculating, and as the tension between them grew thicker, it became clear. This was no longer about survival. It was a fight for control, a fight for freedom. Kara stepped forward, her voice ringing out through the silence. You can't run from what you are, Elena. You are one of us, you always were. Elena's jaw clenched, her hands balling into fists. No, I'm not like you, I never was, and I'll make sure you know that. Without another word, Elena moved. She was a blur of motion, faster than anyone could react. The first soldier went down with a single swipe, his weapon falling to the floor with a deafening clatter. Her speed was beyond anything she had ever experienced. Every movement felt effortless, every strike precise and deadly. The room became a whirlwind of chaos as the soldiers scrambled to gain control, but they were no match for her. Lucas stepped forward, grabbing the nearest weapon from the fallen soldier. But he didn't fight, not directly. His role was to protect, to help Elena keep her focus. He knew the gravity of the situation. If they didn't stop this madness now, there would be no going back. As the soldiers fell one by one, Kara's expression remained unchanged, her eyes narrowing with something that almost resembled respect. I didn't expect this much resistance, she said almost to herself. But you can't fight what's already inside you, Elena. You can't escape what we've made you. Elena paused for a moment, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm of battle. She could feel the alien energy pulsing within her, the technology coursing through her veins. But something in her snapped. The fear, the manipulation. They had tried to control her, to turn her into a weapon. But she wasn't their weapon. She wasn't anyone's weapon. She was something more. I'm not your tool, Elena said, her voice low but powerful. I never was. With a burst of force, she pushed forward, breaking through the remaining soldiers like a wave crashing against the shore. Kara, standing in the center of the room, was the last one left. She hadn't moved, hadn't shown any sign of fear. Her composure was unsettling. But Elena knew better. She could feel the fear lurking just beneath Kara's cold exterior. They were all terrified of what she could do now. Kara met Elena's gaze, her lips curling into a tight smile. You've changed, Elena. You've become something more than we could have hoped for. But the war is still coming. You can't stop it. Elena's eyes flashed with anger. I'm not the one who started this war, she said, stepping forward, but I'll be the one who ends it. Kara made a sudden move, pulling a hidden device from her belt. Before Elena could react, the room was filled with a harsh, blinding light, a pulse of energy that surged through the air. Elena flinched, feeling the energy course through her. It wasn't just physical, it was something deeper, something meant to disrupt the very essence of who she had become. But Elena wasn't about to let that stop her. The power inside her surged back with a vengeance, pushing against the energy field Kara had triggered. The battle between their energies intensified, the room shaking with the force of their struggle. Lucas watched in horror, his heart pounding. He could see Elena straining, the light in her eyes flickering as she fought to maintain control. She was teetering on the edge, between the human side that still clung to her and the power that threatened to overtake her completely. Stay with me, Elena, Lucas shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. You're not alone, her head snapped toward him, her eyes narrowing with focus. The human side of her, the side that had always cared for him, fought beside him, was still there. It was a flicker, but it was enough. With a roar, Elena broke free of Kara's energy trap, her form glowing with an otherworldly light. She was more powerful than anything Kara had anticipated. In one swift motion, Elena disarmed Kara and slammed her into the wall, the force of the impact leaving a dent in the concrete. The room fell silent, save for the sound of Elena's labored breathing. The battle was over, For now. Kara struggled to sit up, her eyes wild. You can't win. You don't know what they'll do when they find out you've betrayed them. Elena stepped back, looking down at the fallen woman with a mix of pity and determination. Let them come, she said, her voice calm but unwavering. I'm not running anymore, and neither are you. As she turned to face Lucas, her expression softened, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Still, for the first time in a long time, Elena felt like she was in control of her own destiny. The storm within her had calmed, but there would be more storms to come. And this time, she would be ready. The final choice. The silence that followed. The battle felt almost unnatural, as though the world itself had paused to take a breath. The hum of machinery and the distant echoes of alarms were all that remained. Elena stood in the center of the command room, her hands trembling from the energy she had just unleashed. Her chest heaved with every breath, but beneath the exhaustion, there was something else, something profound, a sense of finality that was beginning to settle in. Lucas approached her slowly, his gaze soft, cautious. His heart was still racing, and his thoughts were clouded by the events that had just unfolded. But despite everything, despite the chaos and destruction, one truth was undeniable. Elena had made her choice, and it was a choice that would change everything, not just for her, but for the entire world. Elena. Lucas's voice cracked as he spoke her name. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain the flood of emotions that overwhelmed him. Relief, fear, hope, it all tangled together. You did it, you stopped them. She didn't respond right away, her eyes distant, lost in thought. For a moment it felt like she wasn't even there with him, like her mind was elsewhere, somewhere far beyond the walls of the facility. Finally her gaze met his, and in her eyes he saw something different, something both powerful and tragic. I stopped them, Elena echoed, her voice steady but tinged with an emotion Lucas couldn't quite place. But at what cost, Lucas? What did I become? The words stung, but they were true. She had given everything to stop the machines, to tear down the corrupt system that had used her as a weapon. But in doing so, she had unlocked something deep inside herself, something that threatened to consume her. The power, the alien technology that ran through her veins was stronger than anything she had ever imagined. And with it came the temptation to use it, to bend the world to her will. Lucas could see the battle raging in her eyes. She was torn, caught between the woman she had been and the weapon she was becoming. She had freed herself from their control, but now the question remained. What was she going to do with that freedom? Elena, he said softly, stepping closer to her, his hand reaching out to touch hers. You're not alone. Whatever you decide, we'll figure it out together, but you don't have to carry this burden on your own. Her eyes softened as she looked at him, and for a brief moment it seemed as if the weight of the world had lifted from her shoulders. She had always been strong, had always been the one to protect those she loved. But now, she needed protection in return. She needed someone to remind her that she wasn't defined by the power inside her, but by the choices she made. I've been running from this for so long, Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. I've been afraid of what I could become, afraid that the power inside me would take over, that I would lose everything, everything that made me human. Lucas squeezed her hand, his gaze unwavering. You're still human, Elena. You always will be, but you have to choose who you want to be now. You have the power to shape your future. No one can take that away from you. Her gaze shifted toward the horizon, toward the world beyond the facility. The war was still out there, waiting, threatening to consume everything they had fought for. But now, she had the chance to decide. She could keep fighting, keep using the power that flowed through her, or she could walk away, leave the battlefield behind and try to rebuild the life that had been stolen from her. As the weight of the decision pressed on her chest, Elena felt something stir inside, a quiet voice, barely a whisper, but one that cut through the chaos. It was her own voice. The one that had been lost among the noise, the one that had been buried beneath the fear and the anger. The voice that reminded her of who she truly was. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and when she opened them again, they were filled with clarity. "No more battles," she said quietly, her voice firm, her resolve unshakable. "No more fighting for someone else's cause. I'll fight for my own future, for our future." Lucas's heart swelled with relief. He knew then that this was the decision she had been searching for, the one that would allow her to live freely, to choose who she wanted to be, without the weight of others' expectations bearing down on her. "You've made the right choice," Lucas said softly, his voice full of pride. Elena looked at him, her eyes shining with something that felt like hope for the first time in a long while. "We'll face whatever comes together," she said, squeezing his hand. "And this time we'll do it on our own terms." But just as she spoke, a distant rumble echoed through the ground beneath their feet, a reminder that the world was still waiting for them. The storm was far from over, but this time they would face it as allies, as equals. They would no longer be pawns in someone else's game. They were the masters of their own destiny. In the distance, the sound of approaching ships could be heard. A new threat, a new challenge. But as Elena and Lucas stood side by side, ready for whatever came next, there was no fear in their hearts. Together, they had already won the hardest battle of all, the one for their freedom.